Good evening and welcome to the Monday night edition of the People Show with yours truly, Mark Wallace, your host and facilitator. We have a great program lined up for you tonight. We just want to make sure that all of you come on in and join us tonight. We have some great guests coming on with you and so for you. Now, and we're going to get started because we have so much that we have to cover tonight. And of course, tonight is the first of our Monroe Mondays. Monroe Anderson, who is the former retired press secretary of the former Mayor Eugene Sawyer, he is a journalist, retired journalist, and certainly he is a political pundit. And so he is going to be coming on twice a month. On Mondays, and so he will be my guest co-host twice a month, and we will be calling that Monroe Mondays. And of course, State Representative LaShawn K Ford is going to be on with us, and we're going to be talking about what is going on with the squatters problem taking over people's property. One of the things that I guess the thematic thrust throughout this program, we're talking about, most of this is corruption that we're talking about. We're also going to be talking about Donald Trump, and of course the markets hit another loss today in a Pete Hegseth signal chat leak that came out. So we're going to be talking about that tonight. And then some other things we're going to get into a little bit later on in the program, but that's sort of the theme of the story, is that we have all this corruption going on locally as well as nationally. And the question is, does anybody care anymore about the corruption that we are faced with? And so we're going to be talking about that tonight. But we're going to start out with talking about what is going on with the fact that people are literally taking over people's property. Take a look at this clip, and then we're going to come back and talk about it.
This new case is being described by the homeowner as next-level squatting. She and her husband say the person inside is posing as the new owner with bogus mortgage documents. They are demanding that laws be changed to protect property owners, and one state lawmaker is working to do just that.
Since Thursday, we have been fighting to get these people out of our property.
Standing in the rain, practically begging a stranger to move out of their home. Marcia and Carlton Lee never thought they'd be facing off with an alleged squatter.
Someone is in my house saying that they moved in a month ago. I am livid right now.
Marcia says she came by her property last week to show it to a prospective buyer. To her surprise, she says a family of 3 and their dog had moved in.
I have a realtor standing on the sidewalk waiting to see this property. The buyer is across the street. He gets out, and I had to apologize and let them know, like, I can't show you this home right now.
She and her husband came back with police. They say a woman who identified herself as Stacy claimed that she bought the home back in February and was the new owner.
And they said, we've been here for a month. I said, no, you haven't. I just showed this property 2 days ago.
They say the woman showed them this mortgage document. But after looking closely, Marcia says she noticed the property pin was inaccurate. The ABC 7i team did some digging and learned the pin matches a house in Country Club Hills, not this Southside property.
This documentation is not valid, so she's trespassing on my property.
But the couple says police still wouldn't remove them.
Oh, you're both victims. We can't make her get out. They're laughing at me as they're telling me that this is a civil matter.
We saw your story before. We like your coverage. That's why you were the first one that we called, because we want action.
Illinois State Representative LaShawn Ford says he's working hard in Springfield to crack down on squatting.
It's happening, as you know, across the state, and it puts owners and landlords in a bad position.
As rent prices continue to soar, he believes the problem is only going to get worse in Illinois.
Once they get in, the landlord has to go through what you call the Forcible Entry Act in order to evict them. that means that they have to go to court.
Under Ford's proposed law, police would have the power to remove a squatter from the property the moment the rightful owner can prove it's their home, bypassing the months-long eviction process. It's legislation this couple calls common sense.
Like, I really think it's a joke.
Representative Ford met the couple at their property and knocked on the door, hoping to speak with the woman inside. No one would come out to speak with us. The couple says they are at their wits' end, but one thing they won't be doing is paying the people to leave.
The first thing that they asked my husband when we walked up to the door with the police that first night was, are you going to give us our $8,000 back? I spent $150,000 to rehab this property to let somebody else come in this property and tear my property up and tell me it's theirs? Yeah, I'm upset.
We did try calling Stacy, the woman inside the home. She did not return my call. And CPD telling us Area 2 detectives are investigating. Meantime, Representative Ford says his proposed bill is being reviewed in the Rules Committee. But he says he has gotten pushback from homeless advocates who fear this would increase homelessness in Illinois. Ford says he is working with utility companies to prevent squatters from putting services in their name.
All right, joining me for this first edition of Monroe Mondays is a retired journalist, and he is the former press secretary for our former mayor, Eugene Sawyer. Monroe Anderson is joining the program. And then, of course, State Representative LaShawn K is joining the program, and he is here to talk about this issue that has been a pervasive issue with us. Good evening, both of you gentlemen. Hey, Monroe, and it's good to see you, State Representative LaShawn Ford. It's been a while. Hey, we can't hear you. There you go.
I say, I guess, yes, and now we all wear glasses.
Yes, sir. You know, age has its has its impact. Listen, I saw this story. Both of you and I are in the real estate business, so we are, certainly understand this sort of thing. I've not had this as a property owner. I almost had this problem. There was a property that I was a successful bidder on a few years ago. That I was a successful bidder on this property that was being auctioned off. And 2 days after I won the bid, I got a call from the bank asking me if I had accessed the property. And I said, no, I hadn't accessed the property. But then when I drove by the property, what happened was some squatters had moved into the property. And of course, people who have spent a lot of money investing in these properties, and you have people who are basically criminally trespassing, breaking into someone's home, and then the police show up and say, well, it's a civil matter, which I don't understand why we even have to go through this process of having an amendment or having legislation to demonstrate that a person cannot criminally break into somebody's house and set up camp to live. How did this get this way, and what is the bill that you're sponsoring doing about that?
Well, Mark, that's a good question about how did it get like this. Even when we passed the law, Senate Bill 1563, it still doesn't eliminate the problem that some landlords and property owners face, where you have criminals out there creating bogus leases and, meeting people when they are looking to rent property. So you can have me notice that there's a property on the market. And as a realtor, I could have the code to the property to get in and show it. I can have a co-conspirator that actually I work with that you could give the code to, and they could show it to someone, and they go in and we can make a lease a bogus lease as if we're the owners of the property to a individual, and that becomes a lease that has to be disputed in court. So you have a couple of situations here where you have people bringing people in under the false pretense that they're the owners or the leasing agent of a property, and you have people that just take over a property and become squatters. Both ways are bad because the current law today says that squatters have rights like tenants. If they get in there, they have the right to be forced out by court because they have what you call legal standing in the court. There you go, my.
Yeah. Okay. Just a minute here. Who wrote this law, and when did they write it, and how did it get passed?
Oh, this was something, as Mark said, it's been something that's on the books, and he doesn't understand why. This has been around a while, where squatters have, once they take possession of a property, they have legal standing, and you have to take them to court to evict them. What we want to do is take away any legal standing of a squatter.
Yeah. Because in Chicago, the rights of a property owner can be blocked or harassed in a lot of ways. I'm not a big real estate guy like you two, but I've been a landlord since 1976. I bought a building in Lincoln Park that had been divided up into 4 apartments when I bought it, and I had to evict somebody because they didn't pay when I first bought the place. They weren't squatters, but they may as well have been since they weren't paying rent. And I evicted them, and I had to wait several months before I could put them out. And when the sheriff showed up to put them out, then they ripped up the apartment completely, ripped plumbings, knocked holes in the building or what have you, because they were upset they were being evicted. So I mean, it's not easy owning property all the time, although people who don't own it think so.
Yeah, there's really no really profit in renting properties. In the goal is to finish paying it off and then being able to sell it, get a tax write-off. But there's no real profit in being a landlord, because you got to pay the taxes that constantly go up. You got to pay the maintenance. You have to pay the utilities. You have to deal with a loss of income. So it's tough being a landlord. And I think that what we're trying to do is start a task force to bring landlords, lawyers, tenants, and advocates together to figure out how to have some balance, because real estate, as we all know, when we look at the crash of 2008, the real estate crash really hurt our economy. And the more we do to have a healthy housing market, real estate market, I think it's better for our economy.
Well, there's no question. There's no question that real estate is the driving force for stabilizing our economy here in the Midwest. Thankfully, whenever markets get hit really hard on the East Coast or the West Coast, we don't get hit as hard. But it is, quite disturbing that when you have people who literally violate the law. Now, as I understand it, the squatter's bill or the squatter's law goes into effect if a person has occupied a residence for 30 days or more. Is that correct?
The squatter, they become tenants after a certain period of time.
Right. The law says that if somebody has been at a place for more than for 30 days and they're receiving mail at that address, then that
Adverse
constitutes
possession.
adverse possession. However, if someone moves in or breaks into, because that's what this is, it's a criminal trespass initially. If someone breaks into someone's property and I call the police to say someone has broken into my property, I need to have that person arrested or removed from my property. The police show up and they show some bogus lease or fraudulent documentation. Nonetheless, it's still a criminal trespass, as in this case that we just saw in the news story, that the person had been to their property 2 days prior. It would seem to me that HB 1563, and I read through some of the narrative of it, but it would seem to me that it would amend that to say that if an owner shows up, they call the police and file a police report and says that somebody has broken into my property. Under most cases, they will take that person in and arrest that person for a criminal trespass.
Exactly.
Why is that?
Bill passes.
Is that the essence of this piece of legislation?
Exactly, it is. That's the essence of it, and we need to pass it so that we could take away the legal standing and give the law enforcement the authority to treat them as trespassers. Right now, squatters have rights. We need to take those rights away, and that's what we aim to do with Senate Bill 1563, to take away the rights of squatters. Because they go in and they'll change the locks.
Yeah, let me explain this to me, and probably, and people who are watching this, is what's the philosophy behind letting people just move in to some property and say, okay, possession is 9/10 of the law, so I've got it, it's mine now.
Just like we have a lot of bad public acts, laws on the books, and until someone call out the bad public policy, it continues to be bad. Well, squatting has become alarming now because rent is high, people are unemployed, and people are looking for ways to get over. But what I find really amazing is that squatters are not really homeless people that actually are homeless without shelter. These are professional people that go in and take over people's properties because they know how to work the system.
Yeah.
Squatters have more dignity than a squatter. Homeless people have more dignity than a squatter, because they don't go steal someone's property. They go to a shelter, they sleep in a tent and at the park, they sleep in their cars. They don't go look around to see how we could take someone's property and steal it and take over.
Yeah, Joe English, I think you know him.
Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, Joe's an old friend of mine, and he used to have a lot of property. And he told me there were pros who would move in to rent, not to squat, but to rent, and then not pay rent anymore because they knew how long they could work the system before they had to leave. And usually it was a 6-month period or something like that, where they would live there rent free because they weren't paying it. And then by the time the system showed up to evict them, they were on to the next one.
Yeah. Once you get them in there, they're in. And that's the thing. I mean, so I understand why sometimes it's difficult to rent to the process of applying for a property. Rental is tough because small business owners, they rely on that rent every month to pay the water bill, to pay the trash removal, to pay the maintenance. They need every dollar. Plus, most people still have mortgages. So when you have squatters that take over a property, or people that are tenants that are professional, I would say they're not squatters because they have legal rights and they have tricked people into giving them a lease. So they are negligent tenants. They put landlords in a bad space, and Illinois must do better at getting some balance to landlord and tenants in this state, because the tenants have an advantage over landlords.
What sort of support do you have in Springfield for this bill?
We believe that we should pass it. It passed the Senate with 55 votes, and so 1 no vote. We believe that there are some concerns that's coming up, that people say that landlords may use this as a tool to evict people, or to treat tenants as squatters, and call the police and say that they don't have a legal right here. So
yeah, that's a bogus argument. That's an argument that people who are on the housing side or the housing advocate side. Look, yeah, there are none of us who are unsympathetic about people who are unhoused or people who are struggling and that sort of thing. We can't allow for the two to be conflated. And most people who are homeless and most people who are really having a hard time, as you said before, they're not looking to go and manipulate the situation and have the wherewithal to manipulate the situation to take advantage of somebody's property. And I think that it is a bogus argument that people will use to try to tug at or to make advocates for protecting property owners seem as though that they are not empathetic or sympathetic to people who are struggling. It's far from the case, and I think that that there needs to be a serious pushback to that, and not allow for these advocates who were, I don't even know if I would call them advocates, but certainly for these agitators to suggest that they could just go and take over someone's property just because they think they can. There's a guy, and I forget his name, who they bragged about taking over foreclosed properties back during the days of the mortgage foreclosure crisis. And I said to him, that's not, that doesn't give you the right to go and take over somebody's property, that because the bank has foreclosed on it, and somehow you are putting yourself in some righteous position. That in and of itself is antithetical to taking a moral position. But I don't think that we should allow for anybody, any reasonable thinking person would say that if that is the case, you go to the grocery store, you take your family out to dinner, somebody goes to your house, breaks into your house, change your locks, and you come back home and they tell you that they live there and you can't get back into your home. Do we need to really be sympathetic to that sort of thing? I think that it's such a bogus argument, and we really cannot allow for that to take any type of stands.
And the only way we do that is take away any legal standing of a squatter. And that means that no legal standing means it puts you in your position as a trespasser, and you will be removed, not evicted, but removed. And you could be charged for breaking and entering. And we need to make sure that there are laws that will prosecute. And I hate to use the word prosecute and lock people up, but we need to make sure that there are some consequences and some deterrents for bogus people, for people making bogus leases and renting out a property that they don't own. The other part, Mark, that I've tried to do is work with the utility companies. Just like when you call your telephone company, they look for a code. Otherwise, they don't give you any service. I've talked to ComEd and People's Gas, and my negotiations with them is to put a code on each property. And so if I'm the leasee and the leaseor is giving me a lease, you have to fax it in or you email it to the utility company for services to show that you have a right there. Well, when you do that, the utility company should ask you what's the code. And if the landlord doesn't give you a code, then obviously you didn't rent from the landlord. Now,
So what are the utility companies, how did they respond to that? Are they looking into it, or?
They are looking into it, but it's funny that Mark knows these housing advocates are opposed to that.
Mhm.
They're like, we
Well,
can't deny anybody utilities.
Of course.
What's their argument against it?
Yeah, that you can't deny people utilities. They're in the house and you can't deny them utility services.
Well, you can't deny somebody utility service who has rightful possession of a property. And the way that you verify that they have rightful possession of the property is that the owner of the property, if you are changing the utilities from the current name that it is in to another name, then the owner of the property should have to verify by some sort of code that there is authorization to change that utility into that other person's name. Now, the problem with that is even if they don't change it into that person's name and the person still remains in the property, then the owner is still on the hook for providing utilities for somebody who is not even supposed to be there in the first place. Now, the owner should be able to call the utilities and say, I want my utilities suspended. I want this utility suspended until such time that I call back in and give a code to turn them back on if this happens. But I think that this is pretty cut and dry and should be pretty cut and dry and simple, because again, this is not just throwing people out on the streets. This is not throwing people. These are people who have taken over someone else's property. That is called a criminal trespass. You've broken into my house. And, so I'm not sure why there is any pushback for somebody to say, hey, there's a risk to owning property. And if somebody who is homeless breaks into your property, we give deference to the person who says that they're homeless. It makes no sense on its face.
Let me tell you, it's dangerous because you have some people that may hurt someone. Yeah. You take something from some people and they will shoot you, or you have a person that goes into to try to defend their place and they may get shot. This is serious. And we as the government should be working to prevent this type of interaction diligently.
Yeah, I mean, if a person who owns a property who has this issue, if they can show, which they should be able to show, that they are the registered owner and have a recorded deed at the recorder's office, and they have a copy and they can show that to the police, and that they did not enter into a lease with whoever these people are in their property, they should be able to remove those people from that property. I don't see how a landlord who has a person who has been a tenant, right, and they haven't paid their rent, you've got to go through to the normal process. I mean, that's a whole nother problem that I think is a problem here in Cook County, which is probably one of the worst eviction counties in the country. But that, because even in the state of Florida, if you are behind on your rent and the landlord goes to file for an eviction, you can't even contest that eviction in court unless you put the money up in an escrow with the court. So if you can't put the money up with the court, then you can't contest it. I think it's pretty reasonable.
What state is that?
In Florida.
Yeah.
The state of Florida.
So, that's great.
Yeah, but I think that. Go ahead.
There's another problem with the story that you played. Here's where the professionals become criminals with mortgage fraud and other types of fraud. These people told the police, they produced the documents showing that they were the owners of the property. So it's easy to go out and make a deed and closing papers and change information. And when the police come and say, look, I'm the owner of this property. And so now the police, they don't have time to go check with the recorded deeds office. That's why it becomes an issue that you got to take to court. Or somebody gives peace.
The recorder of deeds is a very easy thing to access today. Just like the police can access your records and they got a computer, they can go in there. It's very easy for them to access the recorder of deeds to pull up a document. And first of all, in order for you to have a document that is supposed to be a certified registered document, there is a recorder of deeds stamp that has to be on the document. And if the owner of that property can produce their tax bill, can produce their proof of ownership, it is very easy to dispel these bogus documents that people are putting forth.
Yes, but these criminals have the ability to take a seal from another property and put the address on it and change the PIN number. It's tough. And that's where the police have to be able to distinguish between authentic and not. And that's why they're afraid to get involved, because now you got a person that say that I am the owner, and they put them out. Now there's lawsuits.
Yeah, I think that a person, if that is the case, if a person can go and they can bring certified documents from the recorder of deeds to a police station.
Okay.
They can go to the county and bring a certified document from the recorder of deeds, right? Let's say the scenario that you just painted is true. Yeah. Then as a part of that legislation, then a owner should be able to go to the particular county and get a certified copy of their deed, and they take that as proof of ownership to the police department. At that point, the police should be able to be empowered.
That's good. That's good. I like that. It doesn't mean that you have to do it at the site, but you could go prove your point of a trespassing at the police station. That's right. I'll take that.
All right. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, listen, Representative Ford, let's you and I talk a little bit further about that, because I think we need to make sure that this legislation is crystal clear. We may have to make some adjustments and amendments there, because people need to be protected. And certainly, there are plenty of tenants' rights in this county and certainly in this state, and we don't want anybody taken advantage of. But owners need to be protected as well.
That's right. So I'll give you another one that we got to look at soon before I go. The street takeovers. I'll be in touch with you on that, because we have to do something about the street takeovers. All right.
We certainly have to do something about that. I agree with you.
All right. Thank you both. Have a good night.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Ford. Thank you. Certainly appreciate you coming in.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Right. Monroe.
Yes.
You see the cabal that they are putting property owners in.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, I'm trying to. I still don't. I'm going to have to look into this, because I don't understand how it got to this point. I'm guessing that they were trying to protect homeless people or people without shelter, and to make sure they didn't get exploited by slumlords. And so maybe that came from there.
Well, that could be part of it, and I think that there's some argument to that, right? There may be
Yeah.
some argument to that, but you can't conflate the two. You can't conflate the two. You can have protections and provisions for people who are unhoused and are homeless.
Yeah.
But there also has to be protection for people who work very hard and spend a lot of money and are on the hook for hundreds of thousands of dollars that they have in debt, that some person can't just go cry homeless or say that this is my property, when in fact that is not their property, or that they sign a lease to it. That has got to be one of the most incredible leaps that people are allowed to get away with, and it takes you 8 months, 9 months to get your property back, to prove that that's not the case. It just shouldn't be.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that we are incapable of being, empathetic with people who need help. It's just not the case. Well, it's been quite a day. It's been quite a day. The markets have not looked so good to opening up this week.
No, the stock market is in terrible shape. And what's interesting about this to me is that everybody assumed that when the stock market started crashing, that Trump would straighten up and fly right, because that would be his one guardrail that would keep him in shape, because he'd lose money. But he seems to not be bothered about the stock market even. He's on a mission to become Putin Jr., and whatever it takes, that's what he's willing to do.
Well, it certainly seems like he's been coached that way, and the people who are, the main drafters of Project 2025, and those people who support that theory and that philosophy are coaching him and saying, "Stay the course." They're telling him, "Stay the course. The market is going to tank, or if it tanks, stay the course. It's going to be short term." And because he is as ignorant as he is, he will go along with that, thinking, that these people are right, when in fact they're not.
Well, but he's been a disciple of tariffs since the 80s. I mean, he really thinks it has some magical potency that it doesn't have. All the economists who study these things say that tariffs are bad for everybody. Tariff wars are bad unless you use them strategically. But using them just across the board, no thought involved in it. You have Elon Musk running around with his chainsaw, just cutting here and cutting there, and with no strategy, no real research on what's going on, and so we have a mess right now, and it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Well, I open up saying, that we talked about this, that the real thematic thrust here is that all of what we're talking about is corruption, which seems to be an accepted, applauded practice that is being legitimized by our 34 count convicted felon.
Right.
And are found liable for sexual something. assault or whatever. And it seems as though that it seems as though this is being romanticized somehow. That law and order doesn't
yeah,
count.
you put a con in the White House, you can expect to be conned. And so we have convict Don, who's in the White House, and he's always cut corners and did things that were shady and suspect. And so that's what's happening now. And it's America is a lot more racist now, or more. Or wait, let me change that. America is a lot more practiced and willing to say and do racist things than, say, 10 years ago. And that's because Trump has set an example for how to do it, and given people permits to be racist.
Mm-hmm.
So they say racist things and they do this whole DEI thing that they have going on now. They're using the initials, but basically it's integration and fair play, and they have turned it into a bad thing.
Well, I heard somebody say, I sat on a panel about a month ago. It's been about a month ago. And I heard somebody say that we should not use the initials. We should use the actual term, diversity, equity, and inclusion. When you say diversity, equity, and inclusion,
right,
it really puts it at the doorstep of what is the problem that you have with diversity, equity, inclusion. Because if you have a problem with diversity, equity, and inclusion, that means that you believe that whiteness is what you really are saying that is more important and that you're protecting. Because diversity, equity, and inclusion, when you just say diversity, equity, and inclusion, who could have a problem with that except for some bigot, racist people or person or groups?
But there are a lot of white people who hated affirmative action, and this diversity, equity, inclusion is really just an evolved idea of affirmative action, that for people who were discriminated against and denied opportunities, that now they get a chance to make up for that. And what's happening in Trump's world in particular is the idea that the white man is a victim, that this practice, these laws are discriminating against him in particular. And it's ridiculous, but because Trump has conned so many people in so many ways, it's taken hold. It's rooted.
He was able to play into the low information, non-voter, rural, white, largely white, non-voter, who he was able to really play into their fears or sensitivities, and he played into that and brought those people aboard. Those people were probably people who didn't really participate in an election. I think there were several polls of people who had not voted in 20 years or something. And in these rural areas where they saw that the percentage of people who lived in these rural communities that never voted or rarely voted were voting at these astronomical increase by 40 or 50%.
Yeah.
In some cases. But, diversity, equity, and inclusion does not mean that you are taking a job and giving it to somebody who is not qualified. It just means that you are not disqualifying somebody who actually is qualified, who happens to maybe not be white and male. But 70% of white women that benefited from the protections of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Well, but right now, what we have going on is the rise of white supremacy again. I mean, it's not the first time it's been. In the 1930s, you had the same threat going on to what we hold dear and near to America as democracy, and so this is just a rerun of what went on back then, and we have to fight it as we did back then. This is another battle to keep the racists from having their will with America.
Well, there was, and I thought I had the clip, but there was a time where Ross Perot and Al Gore, and I think it was back in 1990 or somewhere, 91, somewhere there before he became vice president. But he and Al Gore were on with what's the suspender host guy's name?
Don King. Not Don King.
Not Don King.
Larry King.
Larry King. And they were in a debate about they were in a debate, and of course Ross Perot brought up tariffs. He was a supporter of tariffs.
Yeah.
And Al Gore shut him down, showing that we had tried this once before in 1930, and it is largely blamed for the Great Depression that it brought on. When
it didn't bring it on; it continued it. It would have fallen on of its own weight, except this law is smoot.
Yes.
Yeah, I forget the other half of it right now. But anyway, it prolonged it. They brought the tariffs in, and we had to go to war, literally, with Germany and Japan before we got out of the economic mess that we were in.
Yeah. And it, so, and I saw that and I wondered, I was like, why isn't the media picking this up? Because I think this, it's apropos to show that we've been down this road before, and why this is not a good thing. But I'm not sure that that Republicans who are in the Senate, who are in Congress, I'm not sure that these are people who don't agree with this. Now, we talked about this, and I hear that some people say that they're afraid. They may be afraid for their lives. They may be afraid for their families' lives. That if they go against Trump, that they could risk something happening to them, like what happened to Nancy Pelosi's husband, and that type of thing.
Or
do you see it the same scenario?
The guy who broke into Governor Shapiro's mansion and set it on fire, Pennsylvania, and who also planned to hit the governor in the head with a hammer. No, that's a problem. That's a problem for them. And also, they're afraid to be primaried. They want to keep their jobs. But the reality of the situation right now is that Trump's policies are so bad and so unpopular that the House is going to convert back to the Democrats next year. During Trump's first, when the midterms came around, after he'd been in office for 2 years, Democrats gained 40 seats in the House. So and right now in the House there's a 3-seat differential. And so it's a given that the Democrats will take the House back, which will, and in fact, since the Congress, the House controls the purse strings, Trump is not going to be able to do all the damage he's doing now. That the Republican House representatives are allowing him to do.
Well, he's not able to get much done now in terms of anything new because he's doing everything by executive order, which doesn't give him
right. But yeah, true. That's very true. However, if the House would do, if it were Democrats in the House instead of Republicans who are just going along with the program, he wouldn't be able to get it done. He's not able to get it done now, but what the Republicans are doing now is letting him get away with doing things by decree. These firings that are going on throughout the country. I think right now we have 280,000 people out of work because of Doge, Elon Musk's illegal operation. If the Republican House were to assert its authority, the purse string is controlled by the House, not by the president writing some executive order. They would just they would just say no. The House would say no, you can't do that. This is our responsibility. But they're so bullied by the convict who's using mob tactics to do what he's doing that they're going along with the program.
Well, do you see that even that this is hurting people in their districts? I kind of equate this to the empty pool syndrome that happened in the South, where when they integrated public pools, rather than integrate them, they emptied the pools out and put concrete in the pools so that nobody would go into the pools.
Yeah.
Do you think that the people in these districts would rather have themselves stripped of their important necessities, like having their 401ks stripped, or them attempting to privatize Social Security and cutting Medicare and Medicaid with that sort of thing? Do you think that the people will hold on this, or do you think that they will go along with this if it means that it will hurt other people that they don't like?
No. This is too personal and too close to home for them to go along with this. This is why you're having all these protests on a daily basis throughout the country, because white people are beginning to feel this, and it's only going to get worse. They weren't so concerned about it when they thought it was just going to be Hispanics, or they wouldn't be so concerned about it if they thought it was going to be black folks. But it's indiscriminate. They're just chopping and firing people. They even hitting soldiers, former vets, and usually that's a hands-off situation. It's Trump is zealously trying to become a dictator, and so
He wants to be a dictator. I agree that he wants to be a dictator.
yeah,
I point this back to the date that he went to meet Kim Jong Un. When he went to meet Kim Jong Un, and they
yeah,
gave Kim Jong Un a military parade, the first thing that he came back here asking for was how can he get a military parade?
yeah, yeah,
And he harped on it. Then he started saying, this is when he started the mantra is, well, I'm the president of the United States. I should be able to do whatever it is that I want to do. I'm the president.
right, right.
I
No,
mean, he doesn't even have a clue.
no, he doesn't care, and he doesn't have a clue. But more so, well, his clue is he likes the way uh, the dictators get to run their countries. They have total control and total power. And Trump is a narcissist, remember. So,
Right.
as a narcissist, he wants to do it his way so that it will benefit him and screw the rest of us. And that's it.
Well,
All
I think that's what's happening with him using these tariffs that are tanking the market. I believe that he's got a serious, lump and dump kind of scheme going on here that's benefiting him and his cronies.
yeah. Well, right, exactly. No, they're cutting Social Security, because rich people don't need Social Security, so
Right.
it's useless to them. If you have even $10 million, then Social Security is nothing to you whatsoever. And so
Well, security is not even a part of the federal budget. It's not even allowed by law to be a part of the federal budget because it is paid by the employer and by the
yeah,
employee. It's a big
yeah,
pension, public
right,
pension fund.
right. But the plan is, and then it's important to understand this. The plan is to make Social Security fail so that it could be
Yes.
privatized. And then
Yeah. So they can take $2.7 trillion and yes. So they
right,
can take the $2.7 trillion and put it with their money,
yeah, right,
their money works.
yeah,
And they can make more money and people will get fewer dollars.
right, right. No, the right wing move right now, Republicans in particular, is to make privatized government as much as possible because there's gold in them their laws and revenue.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and this is what it's all about right now is the people with the money want to make more money.
Well, you said something about Donald Trump that you thought that Donald Trump will be weakened by the middle of the summer.
Yeah,
That he will.
I was on Vin Jaworski's show
Mhm.
Last week, and my prediction is that because Trump is doing so much damage to so many voters that we have the midterms coming up next year. It's a year and a half away now, 18 months away, and the Republicans in congressional seats are going to be worried about losing their jobs, and so they're going to be scrambling away from him. by the 4th of July. He's not going to have the hardcore cult that he has now. Now, there'll be some MAGA people that'll go to their grave defending him and hanging behind him. But there are others who are more transactional, more what's in it for me, that are going to say, oh man, no. If we don't do something about this, I'm not going to be a congressman anymore. So I'm not voting for this.
So what of the legislators do you think would be more likely to join the forces with the Democrats to put a hold on Trump's shenanigans?
Well, the important people are going to be senators right now, because a lot of the congressional seats have been gerrymandered in such a way where the districts were drawn up where Republicans will win them regardless of what happens. But with senators, U.S. senators, you have to get the support throughout of the entire state voters, and people like who either have some loyalty to democracy, or those who think at this point that it's gone too far. They're going to be jumping ship. Senator Murkowski of Alaska is one example of that. Another would be Senator Collins of Maine, because she's been squishy and wishy-washy on things. She says she's for women, but then she votes for these crazy anti-abortion laws.
Right.
Yeah, so she's going to be a problem. You got Rand Paul, who's a senator from Kentucky. He's Ron Paul's son, and he's against terrorists. And interestingly enough, he's particularly against terrorists to Congress or to Canada. And the reason for that may be, no, forget it. It is that Canadians have stopped buying bourbon, and bourbon is to Kentucky what the automobile is to Michigan. I mean, it's important to their economy.
Mm-hmm.
You also have McConnell, Senator McConnell, who also is anti-tariff, because tariffs are taxed. Trump tells this big lie about how China is going to pay the money for the tariffs, and that's not how it works. If America puts a tariff on, I'll make it plain, a loaf of bread. Let's say there's a $5 loaf of bread, and Trump puts a $10 tariff on it. Then when that bread comes in, if it's being from another country, it's automatically going to be 50 cents higher, 10% higher.
Right.
And as a consumer, you're going to pay that. The company's not going to absorb that expense. And so,
well, because we actually export more to China than they export to the United States. So the sheer numbers of that, if they want to get into this trade war with China, is obviously going to have much more of a negative impact on the United States than it will on China.
Well, the other thing is See, Trump, as you and I both know, is an ignoramus. He doesn't know what's going on, and so he's talking about building factories in America because we lost a lot of factories
Mhm.
as,
Right.
as, as the world changed, the business world changed, and
Well, not only did the business world change, but the business world changed thanks to the start of Ronald Reagan and Reaganism, and continued
yeah, right,
through the
right,
Bushes uh,
right,
with not enforcing the antitrust laws and allowing for people to offshore their companies for the past 45 years.
yeah. This is true, uh, and that's the horse he's beating. But this is the
Hmm.
situation: is that China has moved away from people putting parts in cell phones. Um, manual labor where you're just standing at a production line, plugging in
Hmm.
whatever uh, a gadget goes. That's being replaced with automation. Robots are doing that. And so, even if we moved manufacturing um, uh, factories back here, then robots will be doing those jobs, not Americans. Uh, when I
Well, I agree with the premise that we need to have industry. We need to have industry back because there's a role for it. You may not necessarily have as many people working in one particular factory as we once did. You might not have as many, but but even at that, in order to move industry back, this can't happen like you're building a housing development, right? It's going to take 3 to 5 years to build and get running the average manufacturing. I'm not saying that we should not be working toward that, but the reality is that's not going to happen. You
well,
know,
and also though it's what we need to do is have factories. We have to be strategic about this. Yeah, we can
yes.
bring some factories back, but it should be for our supply line, the things we need that are important to us for our supply line. Uh,
Hmm.
and we don't need to, uh, because that's what the Chinese are now focusing on. They're trying to figure out what the future holds or what type of things we're going to need for the future, and that's what they're building. Right
Hmm.
now, if the Chinese take over Taiwan, they will rule the world because Taiwan has the best and most sophisticated battery manufacturing places. Uh, they control I think it's 90% of the batteries being produced. The batteries that you need to run your iPhone, the batteries that you need to run your cars, your your cars that rely on computers so much. I mean, much of what modern life is run by batteries, and Taiwan produces the vast majority of batteries. So if China is able to get them back, the country back, then they're going to be in charge. And so,
Yeah, but I think there are many of the global economists and those who are experts in that area are saying that uh, even though that might be something that China would like to do, but the probability of that is um, very low of that happening because the
uh,
consequences would.
yeah, but China doesn't. China for hundreds of years was an empire. They were an empire
Mhm.
5,000 years ago. they want to make China great again, and so if they won't care about the world economy if they have the the driving engine of the batteries, they'll still be in charge.
Mhm.
You know, they got Hong Kong back, and they promised that they were going to let Hong Kong be a business capital, of the Asian world that it was. And they've changed it. They're making it communist, and they're running it. They're making these changes that is not working well for uh, people from Hong Kong, uh, or for the world, for that matter. Uh,
Mhm.
you they I don't think they're going to care that much. They want to become the world power again, and so that's
Well,
their, just like Putin
well,
wants.
if we don't cut this guy off at the knees, they could feel very encouraged. Um, let me ask you a question. There was another debacle with the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth.
Yes, yes.
The
It's,
weekend
it's,
talk
you
show.
know, he was not. You talking about DEI,
Yeah.
affirmative action, whatever. He he is not qualified to be in charge of the defense of in charge of the world's greatest, most powerful military in the history of the world. Not just in today's world, but there's never been an army like ours before. And you got this guy who is a Fox News anchor, is totally incompetent. It's too big a job for him, and he doesn't even realize how security works. Back in World War II, they had this slogan: "Loose lips sink ships." So, which meant you didn't talk about world secrets or war secrets, because the enemy might find out about it, and whatever plan you had, you wouldn't have anymore. They'd be ready for us. This
But what
guy,
about all of these? What about all these Republican so-called patriarchs who would allow for the national security of the country, of the world, to be put in peril by putting such an incompetent, lack of character in charge of, what is it, 2.5 million personnel or something like that, $600 billion
right,
in
trillion,
of a,
trillion. But anyway, the thing is, Republicans are getting shaky on that. That's going to be one of the things that will lead to Trump's downfall, because Republicans already are getting shaky. Uh, there are some of Trump's supporters who are saying that this is nuts. This guy is totally incompetent. He's got to go. And he hasn't even been in the job 3 months, and they're already saying we can't have him doing this. He's screwing up. He's he's having conversations on lines that aren't secure. So anybody who knows how to um, tap any um, online phone that's not secure can hear exactly what we're doing and get the and therefore if we when we were bombing Yemen, for example,
Mhm.
it was being discussed. The whole plan's being discussed. Somebody could just listen in and they would know it was happening and kill our people.
Right. It could have blown some of the aircraft out of the
Exactly.
air.
Exactly. And and that's, and if it wasn't Trump's person in the real world, if somebody had done that, what he's done, they would be fired that minute that it was discovered. The army
Right.
would send some people down, and more than likely be arrested and tried for dereliction of duty or something.
But this is so serious of where we are, that you have people who seem to be more concerned about their. I'm not sure what they're concerned about, to tell you the truth. When you think about just how important these serious issues are, that people are so cavalier in the positions, and I'm talking about Republicans who would beat their chest to talk about how American they are.
Yeah, right. Well, these are all people who are part of the Trump cult that he put in. Pardon me.
Mhm.
They put in all these insecure people, and not only insecure but incompetent people who,
And completely defiant.
yeah. So now it's catching up with them already. It hasn't been that long, but it's obvious that they're not prepared to do the job. They're not equipped to do the job. But Trump hired people who were obedient to Trump, because that's what
Right.
yeah.
Well, this is what they said, that this is what Project 2025 said that they would actually do. They would put people in office, not people who were competent or people who understood process, but they would put people in place who understood compliance with Trump.
Right. Who was sworn, and so and Trump is incompetent himself, so he had to find people more incompetent than he was, who would follow his orders faithfully. And so we got a big mess that's happening, and it's going to get worse.
Well, I mean, if to get any worse, we could literally see someone able to. Well, I guess the question becomes: are we vulnerable for somebody that will be able to attack the country again, like they did in 9/11?
Now, yeah, we are. Yeah, because we got people in charge who don't know what they're doing. But let's let a couple of weeks pass and see what new damage that is being done to us, and what resistance there is, and discuss it when I come back the next time.
All right. Okay. Monroe Anderson, folks, who is with us twice a month now. This is our first night of our Monroe Mondays. Thanks so much for joining me, Monroe, and we'll talk again.
Okay. All right. Take care. Okay.
Take care. Appreciate it. All right, folks, listen. There's so much going on. I got a couple of clips that I want to play for you. I want you to take a look at some clips that we set up, that my technical producer set up, talking about this whole thing with happening with. Well, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But what I want to talk about is this past weekend, there was on 75th Street, and you should reach out to your people, tell them to tune in. On 75th Street, Charlie Dates, who is the pastor of the Salem Baptist Church, and he's a pastor of Progressive Baptist Church. Now, I'm going to get into the church thing because I made a post earlier and some people were commenting about it. But I want to talk about this thing that happened on 75th Street. And Reven Fellows sent me a post and about what happened. Now, I went to find out, well, I went to check it out on Saturday, what this whole thing was in terms of the buy on 75th Street. And it's really, the premise of it is a good thought. But I am someone who believes that we have to get out of the knee-jerk reaction and we have to institutionalize practices in order to stabilize and to enrich our communities, from education to economics. And here we're talking about both, because you need to understand processes and how to resolve concerns and issues in order to strengthen the infrastructure in our communities. Now, they had this thing that they call Buy Black on 75th Street. Sounds really good. Sounds really good. In fact, the shirt that I have on here came from my buddy James Muhammad, who was selling his t-shirts, and this is blackmailed. See what this says? Blackmailed by God. That's what that is. Blackmailed by God. And of course I supported and bought one of his shirts and told him that I was going to wear it on tonight's podcast. But they had this set up on 75th Street from King Drive going back east down to St. Lawrence. Most of the businesses, and they had these booths set up, of businesses that were not established on 75th Street. And so the people who actually were on 75th Street, who had businesses or have businesses who've been there on 75th Street, got none of the benefits of this so-called Buy Black on 75th. They imported businesses that were Black-owned businesses, but the premise was that you were going to be supporting the businesses in that corridor. And the major corridor of businesses on 75th Street, although there are some down on that east side, but most of them are from King Drive going all the way back to Indiana. Those have been most of the businesses there. There are a couple of businesses that have been longstanding. The Frame House has been longstanding right there on 75th Street. That's east of King Drive. But what benefit did those stores get when you had people who were set up in booths that were along the street, but none of the businesses that had already been there had been set up? So there was a young lady, I don't know who she was, and I was trying to find out who she was, but she was expressing her concerns about there was no support for their businesses. Take a look.
You see how quiet it got down here? It's dry down here. It got quiet down here. It's quiet down here. Where they had the news flash at, where we thought they was gonna be. All right.
So on 75th Street, where they did the press conference, where the majority of the Black-owned businesses are, they had the setup all the way down on east of there on 75th Street from King Drive down to St. Lawrence, where most of those stores in that area, most of the commercial stores are vacant. Let me tell you, this is a systemic problem that we have. And this is why it is important that this is our problem. When I say our problem, I mean it is our problem as the citizens, as the people, as voters. The problem is that you had Charlie Dates, you had Will Hall, who was the alderman of the 6th Ward, and the question is that they never had a conversation as to the planning and to the development of this with the business owner. Now, there should never have been any booth set up there. What they should have been doing is encouraging people to come to the corridor and support the businesses that were established already there. You have businesses like Paris Cleaners that's there on 75th and Prairie, Black-owned. Limbs, everybody knows Limbs is the barbecue place. That is Black-owned. That's been there for years. You have a new business that established. You have the Shoe Shine shop that's been there for years. That was originally Solomon and Solomon, but Solomon's nephew bought it from Solomon's wife after Solomon's passing a few years back. You have the tailor shop that is there. You have those businesses that have been established there for years that never got any support from this Buy Black. You have Brown's Sugar, the bakery that is there, over there. They didn't get any support. So the problem that I have is that these things are done in order for people who go into these public offices to promote themselves. Now, what I saw Will Hall doing was setting up a pop-up with his picture on it at the corner of each block on each side of the street so that everybody could see that Will Hall was the alderman of that, and he was the one that put that on. Okay, good. He should be recognized for putting it on. He also should be recognized at the great failure of this effort. Now, I'm not saying that the people who were there should not have been supported, but it was for the businesses on 75th Street, not to import some people and set up and have some big vending thing and bring the mayor out and have this press conference and news media to come out to make it appear that they're doing something that is good. Well, the premise about doing it was good. The execution of it was not good at all. Because the execution of it should have been promoting people to come to support the businesses this day on 75th Street. We're calling for people to support the businesses there. But you're not shouldn't be calling for people to just come and support the businesses there. You want to promote the businesses so that people will come and repeat supporting the businesses, because there are thousands upon thousands of our people who don't know that those businesses are established on 75th Street. And this would have been a great opportunity for the alderperson and for Charlie Dates or anybody else who was involved with that to say this is how we have to institutionalize supporting and strengthening our own as an economic base, is that we continue to spend our money in our communities, shopping with our businesses that have already been established here. That's the way that is. There should not have been a single display or booth on the street. There should have been the alderman and Charlie Dates and whoever else was promoting it to go shop with the businesses that were there, established already. This is the problem. We have people who are in these public offices that are making unilateral decisions without the voice of the people being engaged. It is the same thing that they do politically, is that you have the party deciding on who the candidates are going to be, and they do the selection, but we do the electing. We should be selecting as well as electing, but we cannot do that if we're not willing to empower ourselves by organizing in masses so that we all over Chicago, certainly where we are represented on the south and west sides of Chicago, we should be controlling who it is that we put into office and not allowing for hand-picked politicians that are not public servants. They're hand-picked politicians to serve the interest of somebody else's agenda that does not include the people. This is the problem that I have. So I have the problem with us. And I am begging us that this is never going to end unless we change. And that means that we have to abandon our self-centered agendas for a bigger and broader picture, that we have more power to determine who it is. The only way that we will have that is that we have got to organize ourselves in such a fashion that it becomes what is supported by us as voters in our communities, which is simply this, is that we have to organize the greatest independent Black Democratic voting bloc. And the reason why it is independent is that we have to infiltrate the Democratic Party, and we have to take the parts that have taken us for granted, and we have to send them a serious message saying that what we are doing is we are changing the structure, that it is no longer going to be you. This is the party that we are going to work with, but we are going to control it. We're going to infiltrate it, and we are going to be the determiners of what our destiny is, and you are going to support the interest of the people rather than you dictating to the people what our interests will be. The only way that we can do that is that we have to organize ourselves in the numbers for us to do it. We need at least, on a start, of 10,000 of us each in each of the wards that we live in on the south and west sides of Chicago. We established 10,000 people in each ward in our block. 10 by 10 to win is the block, the independent block. Then we have the power and the ability to emerge people that we would want to select to elect in these particular offices of alderpersons, state reps, or state senators, mayors, Cook County commissioners, Cook County board presidents. We have the power to change all of that. We have the power to do it. but we have to put ourselves in a position to have the power to do it. Otherwise, what we saw happen on 75th Street, which was a dog and pony show. Now, please hear me and don't get me wrong. There were people who had businesses that were black, that were out there, that had booths. I don't know how much they paid for the booths or if they paid for them at all. But this was not what Buy Black on 75th Street was supposed to be. And it certainly was not what people who had businesses on 75th Street understood what that was supposed to be. I am going to be on 75th Street and I'm going to be doing some live shots from 75th Street, talking with some of the owners, just so that you can see what they thought that Buy on 75th Street was supposed to be about. Who benefited from it? It was not the businesses on 75th Street. But this is the problem that we have, is that we have people who are in office that we didn't select, that somebody else decided that these are going, or this is going to be your representatives. I get the premise, and I give them credit for the thought and the idea, and to move that forward and that sort of thing. So, it was a day that people came out, and it was a little on the dreary side, and almost rained a little bit, but still there were people there. Obviously it was a little on the chilly side. Maybe if it was warmer, there'd have been more people, but still the execution of it, the planning of it was poor. The idea is great. The planning and the execution was poor. Why was the planning poor and the execution poor? Is because you didn't talk to the business owners along 75th Street. You didn't include them in the process of the idea of bringing the idea and formulating the idea that you have a broad set of people who are contributing to the planning of the idea so that it is executed well, but you have the voices of the people who are there, who are chiming in. But you had two people who saw an opportunity, who came up with well, it's not even a new idea, but they came up with the idea to execute it the way they did, but they did not include the people who were in the businesses on 75th Street. Not the black businesses on 75th Street. Now, I can tell you this, I don't even know if LIMS was a benefactor of that. As busy as they are, and certainly they have been receiving some great accolades in the news cycle over the past month or so. But this is emblematic of a broader problem that we have across the city of Chicago's south and west sides of Chicago for black communities. And we are somewhat complicit. We are somewhat responsible because we are not doing and changing what we need to change. So until we make that change, and until we put ourselves in a position to be a threat to our own party, which is the Democratic Party, which we need to infiltrate. We need to make the Democratic Party support policies that are beneficial and not regressive to our communities. We have too many policies that are regressive to our communities, that our Democratic representatives are legislating and putting into place solely because they know that we are not participating in a check and balance situation. If we did that, we could change the entire trajectory of what's going on here. Now, we can't just complain about it and not be willing to do anything about it. And it's going to take masses of us, not just one, masses of us to do it. And it doesn't take, I don't have to get elected to a public office to do this. We as people of the public, together, we can make the people in the public office provide what it is that we need. Now, I talked to Will Hall, and he started telling me about he gave speed cameras because this is what the people want. Well, the people need to be educated, and the people need to be informed on what these policies are so that people will know exactly what they're getting. And I said to him, you need to make sure that the people get what they need, and it's not always what they want that is always best for us, without understanding how those policies work and how they are instituted and what the outcomes are. Now, I have the statistics for the cameras. We're going to be coming out with a pretty broad story that is going to show that the crash data, for example, there's 162 speed cameras in the city of Chicago that's been out for the last 10 years. And the crash data for the 162 locations, the 162 cameras within an eighth of a mile, shows that there is a 14.1% crash rate around the 162 cameras over a 10-year period. Where they want to put the 50 cameras that have not had any cameras for 10 years, the crash rate is 14.2. Virtually no difference in crash rates where they didn't have cameras for 10 years and the crash rate where they have 162 cameras over the same 10-year period. That's just to give you an example. That comes from the city's own data, the city's data, not Mark Wallace data, not the Citizens to Abolish Red Light Cameras data. We took the city's data, their crash data, their traffic crash data, their locations for their cameras, and analyzed their data. And this is what it demonstrates. And that's just to give you an example of the information that we are bringing to you regarding the system, the camera system. The point is that you give people something and it's like a placebo. Now, when you say we're going to create child safety zones or school safety zones, that sounds great on the surface. Who wouldn't want to have safer school zones? Sounds great on the surface. But the reality is that you want to know what, how much safer we are. Let me tell you how much safer we are. And this is going to be coming out in a broader report that we're going to be doing. All right. So just to give you some, all right, so take a look at this. Here's what we found from 2015 to 2017. So what we're looked at is we included some or excluded 2015 to 2017. So let's look at the crash data starting from 2015. So 2015, there were 9,830 crashes. 2016, 44,297. Going up. 2017, and we have 162 cameras, 83,786 crashes, and 284 red light cameras. 2018, 118,950 crashes. 2019, 117,763 crashes. 2020, 92,093 crashes. 2021, 108,765. In 2022, 108,411. In 2023, 110,747. In 2024, 112,040 crashes. Now, the pre-implementation detail crash data from 2012 to 2013 is the report that we for you that information. We're going to get that information. But the city's prior 2023 report claims that 2012 to 2013 had 137,218 crashes citywide, and claims that 2022 and 2023 had 175,983 crashes citywide, which was an increase of 28%. The above information, or the information that I just gave you, the data shows 108,411 plus 110,747, which is a total of 219,158 crashes in 2023. So the numbers have escalated. So with the 162 cameras that we have, and now they want to add 50 more, and the 284 red light cameras, crash rates, these are the city's information, have increased. So what's the bottom line? Is that the cameras are not providing the safety that they have convinced some of you that they're doing. This is nothing more than a private, big company or small company grift where people are getting filthy rich off of the disguise of safety. We're going to be putting out the detailed report of this to show you how we are being taken advantage of. And this is a Democratic policy that we must as the people, infiltrate the Democratic Party. The Republican Party is not a party for us. They could care less. We have to fix the Democratic Party, but that is only going to happen by we, the people. You and I and a bunch of other people coming together, banding ourselves together, and removing the people who are there, or some of the people who are there, and sending a message to the rest that we are not going to continue operating the same way that we have operated, and allowing for them to operate in the same way. All right, so I want you to please, if you have not, please text 10x10 to the number 855-909-1385. I'll put it in the chat. Let me put it in the chat right now. For those of you who may not have, and if you have, please get somebody else to join the text alert, and let's get together and organize ourselves together so that we can build a massive voting block, not just to deal with voting, but to send a message to the people who are already in public office that if you're continuing to put together antithetical policies that hurt our communities, then we are going to have to remove you from office. And we're organizing ourselves now to be in the position to remove you from office during election time. That's the power of organizing. You can send a message now that they shape up or we ship them out. If we don't send a message, they'll continue to do the same thing that they're doing. All right, so I saw this post and I had to play this post. Now, I am a follower of Christ. When I call me a Christian, that's what we go by. I was born in 1960. As far back as I can remember, my mother had us in Bible study. We had to get up in the morning, get around the bed, pray with my mother when we got up, pray before we go to bed. I am a lover. I love Jesus Christ and the teachings of Christ and the principles and practices of Christ. Christ, the church. But I am telling you that I cannot stand the local church today. I am churched out of the local church today. These places that we go to that is called the church look nothing like the Church of Christ. I have this long-standing, for the recent 5 or 10 years, that I would say and continue to say that if Jesus Christ was to come back and come to any of our churches, our local churches, he'd have to go through orientation because he wouldn't know where the heck he was. He wouldn't. There is nothing that is happening in any of these churches that resemble anything of Christ. All of the guilt trips that they put onto people about going to church. If you don't go to church, you're going to hell. And somehow, showing up to church somehow validates that you are a person of Christ. That's not consistent with the scripture. It's certainly not consistent with Christ. The church has been turned into a prosperity center to guilt people into tithing and offering, that if they tithe, that their lives are going to be much better off regardless of how they live. And tithing is only talked about once in the scriptures. But if you go to any of these churches, all they talk about is tithing. And that, you pledge your pledge and you're going to get your new house and your new car. But you can live any kind of way that you want to live. Or there's not very little talk about helping the poor, as Christ talked about over and over and over and over, of helping the poor and the widows. You don't hear very much about that. All you hear is a prosperity gospel in these churches. Now, again, I love the Church of Christ. I can't stand what I see happening in these churches today. The preachers have turned into pulpit pimps, prosperity pimps. I think it is blasphemous that we are allowing for pastors to live these lavish lifestyles and $1 million homes and 4 and 5 cars. My former pastor lost his house and the church. I think that it is a rather disgusting display, which is probably why many churches are emptying out, because people have figured, why would I go in there? There ain't nothing in there that resembles Christ to me. But you know what? Serving God is not about getting up on Sunday morning and putting on your best clothes and going to 7 o'clock service or 10 o'clock service, sweating and spitting and coming back home and somehow you are holier. No, I want to play something that I heard about a woman who was attacked by somebody. And I think that she really put it into perspective about what it means to be a follower of Christ.
Thank you, Mr. President. I didn't expect to wake up yesterday to the news that the senator from the 22nd district had overnight accused me by name of grooming and sexualizing children in an email fundraising for herself. So I sat on it for a while wondering, why me? And then I realized, because I am the biggest threat to your hollow, hateful scheme. Because you can't claim that you are targeting marginalized kids in the name of, quote, parental rights if another parent is standing up to say no. So then what? Then you dehumanize and marginalize me. You say that I'm one of them. You say she's a groomer. She supports pedophilia. She wants children to believe that they were responsible for slavery and to feel bad about themselves because they're white. Well, here's a little bit of background about who I really am. Growing up, my family was very active in our church. I sang in the choir. My mom taught CCD. One day, our priest called a meeting with my mom and told her that she was not living up to the church's expectations and that she was disappointing. My mom asked why. Among other reasons, she was told it was because she was divorced and because the priest didn't see her at Mass every Sunday. So where was my mom on Sundays? She was at the soup kitchen with me. My mom taught me at a very young age that Christianity and faith was about being part of a community, about recognizing our privilege and blessings and doing what we can to be of service to others, especially people who are marginalized, targeted, and who had less, often unfairly. I learned that service was far more important than performative nonsense like being seen in the same pew every Sunday or writing Christian in your Twitter bio and using that as a shield to target and marginalize already marginalized people. I also stand on the shoulders of people like Father Ted Hesburgh, the longtime president of the University of Notre Dame, who was active in the civil rights movement, who recognized his power and privilege as a white man, a faith leader, and the head of an influential and well-respected institution, and who saw black people in this country being targeted and discriminated against and beaten, and reached out to lock arms with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he was alive, when it was unpopular and risky, and marching alongside them to say, "We've got you," to offer protection and service and allyship to try to right the wrongs and fix injustice in the world. So who am I? I am a straight, white, Christian, married, suburban mom who knows that the very notion that learning about slavery or redlining or systemic racism somehow means that children are being taught to feel bad or hate themselves because they are white is absolute nonsense. No child alive today is responsible for slavery. No one in this room is responsible for slavery. But each and every single one of us bears responsibility for writing the next chapter of history. Each and every single one of us decides what happens next and how we respond to history and the world around us. We are not responsible for the past. We also cannot change the past. We can't pretend that it didn't happen or deny people their very right to exist. I am a straight, white, Christian, married, suburban mom. I want my daughter to know that she is loved, supported, and seen for whoever she becomes. I want her to be curious, empathetic, and kind. People who are different are not the reason that our roads are in bad shape after decades of disinvestment, or that healthcare costs are too high, or that teachers are leaving the profession. I want every child in this state to feel seen, heard, and supported, not marginalized and targeted because they are not straight, white, and Christian. We cannot let hateful people tell you otherwise, to scapegoat and deflect from the fact that they are not doing anything to fix the real issues that impact people's lives. And I know that hate will only win if people like me stand by and let it happen. So I want to be very clear right now. Call me whatever you want. I hope you brought in a few dollars. I hope it made you sleep good last night. I know who I am. I know what faith and service means and what it calls for in this moment. We will not let hate win.
I wanted to play that. We only have I just wanted to play that clip, right? I want to thank all of those who joined us on intellectualradio.com. We're going to go off the air, but I'm going to stay on for a little bit longer for those of you who want to stay on Facebook and on YouTube. But I really want to talk about this. And I want to talk about the white problem as we see with what's happening within the Trump administration. Is that I am not trying to advocate for anybody who you like going to church and you enjoy your church and your services. I'm not advocating for anybody not to go to church. I'm simply telling you, as a person, as a follower of Christ, I'm never going to stop following Christ or pursuing Christ and pursuing to govern myself according to his teachings, because again, just like she said, your lining up with Christ, it is important that we learn, and it's important that we fellowship with other like-minded believers. I get all of that. But some of this nonsense that they call the move of God and the move of Christ I'm not buying it. I'm not endorsing it. And I think that it is a bastardization of the very precepts and practices and principles of Christ. There was no better pastor, an example of a pastor, than Jesus Christ to those of us who are followers of Christ. Now, if you're not a believer, this is not even for you. But there is no greater pastor or example of a pastor than Christ. And if you line up Christ as the example of a pastor to what we see in the so-called pastorate today, they look nothing alike. They function nothing alike. And there's nothing scriptural about what we are buying into and that they are promoting to the so-called local church. So you can talk about the parishioners and you can talk about the members, but it is the leadership that God holds accountable for its flock. You will never go and see a sheep herder who will spend all kinds of money and time being on somebody else's farm, looking after somebody else's flock at all. You will never find anywhere, and Christ used a sheep herder as the shepherd and the sheep as we, the followers. and you will never see a sheep herder leaving its flock unattended and uncared for while they go off and live some lavished lifestyle that the sheep has provided for them. I'm telling you that these practices that I see happening in church is or the local church is what's running people away. All this performance and bringing, doing all that they can do to promote people to show up, like they're having some big party. None of which has anything to do with biblical teaching. That somehow you have to have gimmicks for people to come to Christ. Christ didn't use any gimmicks. He didn't use any gimmicks to get people to follow him. What he did is he was in compliance with what he was mandated by God to do. And through the move and through the power of God, he was able to draw people, not with gimmicks, with the Spirit and with the Word, not gimmicks. Because he cared about people. He was there to serve people, not to be served. We have all these pastors running around here with armor bearers. For what? 15, 20 armor bearers. For what? The only people who know who you are the people who come to your performances. You walk out on the streets and walk across the street, they won't know who you are. I saw Charlie Dates, and I don't know Charlie Dates or have anything against him. These preachers walking down the street like they got to have security. For what? All of this stuff that people are doing, that they are calling the church, it's got nothing to do with the church. And I don't want any of you to feel guilty because you don't get up and go to a church service. I go to a church service when I want to go to a church service. I get up every day to pursue Jesus Christ's teachings of the Church of Christ. Every day I go to that church and I attempt to get that together. Every day. If I want to get up on Sunday morning and go to a church service, or if I don't, it doesn't make me any more holy if I go or any less holy if I don't go. And it's not going to make you any more holy because you go or any less holy if you don't go. If you are pursuing the precepts and the practices of Jesus Christ every day in your heart, in your mind, in your soul, that is what's pleasing unto Christ. And practice those principles that we ascribe to in this that we call the Bible. And we get up and to do good and do well by people every day. To make sure that whatever we are doing, that we are doing it for Christ, because he says only what we do for Christ will last. Only what we do for Christ will last. So, for those of you who who want to keep going, go. I'm not telling you not to go. But don't have somebody, what I am telling you is, don't have somebody making you feel guilty that if you don't go, that somehow you are less in line or less with Christ, because that's far from the case. Christ never told us in all of these scriptures from Genesis to Revelation, never told us to go to church. Never. It does not exist in the scripture where he told us to go to a local church. Now, I know that there's somebody saying, well, what about, what about the scripture where Christ told us to forsake not the assembly of believers? All right, let's find that scripture. Let's see if we can find that. Let's find that scripture, and then I'm gonna let you go, because I know that people like to try to proof text. They like to proof text. So let's see. You want a proof text? It says here, this in Hebrews 10, verse, let's start at verse 23. It says, let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on forward, love and good deeds. Let us not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. It simply says, let us not give up on it. But more importantly, let us encourage each other. So stop allowing for people to make you feel guilty that you got to be a member of some club in order for you to be in the fellowship of Christ. You are in the fellowship of Christ when you have confessed to Christ, to God, that you have accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and that you will be pursuing the teachings of Christ, that you will be baptized in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. You don't have to go to some building to be validated that you are a person of Christ. You don't. And again, I'm not telling anybody don't go to church. Keep going to church if you want to go to whatever your respective church is. I'm just telling you that the church that I see today, the church that I left, is a bastardization of the church of the so-called, now the church of Christ will always stand, but this church that is supposed to be emulating Christ is a bastardization of church. And I love Jesus, will always continue to love him. I got on my shirt here saying that I am blackmailed by God, that I am black, male by God, and he will always be the head of my life, and I will try to pursue his righteousness as long as I live. And I thank him for his grace, and I thank him for his mercy. And all that his grace is his grace is giving me that I did not earn or deserve. And his mercies is keeping that from me that I did earn and deserve, the punishment. I wake up and go to bed every single day that he gives me, grateful that he put up with me that day and that he was so merciful to me that he allowed me and grateful for allowing me the next day. So I'm just telling you, don't worry about somebody who tries to put you on some sort of guilt trip. Because I certainly don't. And I won't worry about anybody who wants to criticize anything that I am saying today. But I am telling you, as a follower of Christ, as a Christian, and as someone who you may see in church at some point in time, I am telling you that at this point, I do not, quote unquote, have a membership at any particular church. At this point in time, I may at some point, my wife and I, we may. At this point, I do not. There are pastors that I know. There are ministers that I know. And I have these conversations all the time. And I know a little bit about the Bible. I've been trained to teach. I am a certified, trained Christian educator. Love reading and learning from the scriptures. I know a little bit about the Bible. And will continue to learn and love learning. So I'm going to always be a follower of Christ. I am not always going to be a member of a club. All right, so that's my rant on that. I want to show you something before we close out tonight. That there was a post on my page. I want to thank my graphic designer, Davina, who designed the New People's Shows page. If you haven't seen it, please go on my Facebook page and go to the New People's Shows page and follow me and follow us there on our new page. And but anyway, all of what is going on in the country today with the sickness and the lawlessness with this current administration, and why black people are sitting on the sideline, because black people overwhelmingly tried to tell people, do not vote for this man. I'm not talking about the few black people who were confused, but the 53% of white women and the 39% of Hispanic males that decided that this was better, and many of them are regretting. It's not our problem to fix, because we tried to tell you what was coming down the pike. And they told you what was coming down the pike. And you didn't think that you were included in who they were coming for. And for black folks who think that it is okay for them to violate the law, to go after people, if they are able to do this, which the court is saying that they can't do it, violate people's due process and constitutional rights, if they believe that they can find a crack to be able to do that to them, and they're allowed to get away with it, you're going to be on that list. But I want you to take a listen to this white woman who, this was on my post on my page today.
People keep saying the hands-off protests were so peaceful, like that's some kind of surprise. But if you're white like me, you need to think about what actually made that possible. White people, you really need to sit with this. The protests were peaceful because we were the ones in the streets. Black, brown, and indigenous folks stayed home, not because they don't care, but for two reasons. One, it's not safe for them to show up. Two, it's not their problem to fix. We've all seen what happens when marginalized people show up in big numbers. Suddenly, it's tear gas, rubber bullets, arrest, and just straight up violence. So yeah, the protests were peaceful, but it wasn't because the system listened better. It's because whiteness made it safe for us to show up. And while we're naming things, let's be real. White people put 45 in office, not black voters, not brown voters, not indigenous voters, us. We built this system. We keep it running, and too many white folks are still clinging to it out of comfort, denial, or fear of giving up power. So if you're white and feeling proud that the protests were peaceful, cool. But ask yourself, what are you doing with that safety your skin gives you? Are you showing up when it matters most, or just when it's comfortable? Because this fight, this is our fight, not just in solidarity, but in accountability. 45 is a white problem. The system is a white problem, and it's on us to dismantle it.
Pretty interesting perspective coming from white people. There are white people out there, millions of them, who get it, who really understand it, who get it. And I want to believe that it is more of them who get it than those who want to turn the clock back. And those who want to turn the clock back are trying to enlist as many people as they possibly can, because they do realize that their numbers are shrinking. All right, that's going to do it for me tonight. Thank you all for staying a little bit longer with me as we went over. I do want to offer my condolences, my heartfelt condolences to my very good friend, Judge Leonard Murray, and his entire family on the loss of his eldest son, Malik Murray, who died of an apparent heart attack on Saturday. I didn't find out until this morning. I have not had a chance to talk to my dear friend, and I will. But Judge Leonard Murray, who is the supervising circuit court judge over the building courts and the administrative review, who is also serves on the International House of the African Arts, I believe it is, for the African Fest. And he is just a phenomenal human being to his son, to his daughter, and the rest of their family. My deepest condolences from myself and from my wife. Judge Leonard Murray married my wife and I on April the 29th of 2021. We'll be celebrating our 4th wedding anniversary coming up on next week. But until the next time that we get together, certainly hope to see you all on the next Monday's edition of the People's Show. Thank you, Monroe Anderson, and certainly thank you, State Representative LaShawn K. Ford, for coming on, talking about the issue with the squatters. We're still going to have to continue to do that. I want to make sure that we do the best we can to make sure that that piece of legislation has the right language in it, so that it has the right teeth in it, to protect people from being taken advantage of, people manipulating and taking over their properties. We have so many other things that we have to address. However, we need help. We need help, and we need more of us to bring ourselves together so that we can address these very, very serious and important issues that we have in Chicago, Cook County, and in the state of Illinois. Thank you all so very, very much for tuning into the program, and I look forward to seeing you all next week on the Monday night edition of The People Show.